Myers, who was just 18 when he went to prison and is now 61 once he is free. Is that the end of the role of the Innocence Project of Florida?
Oh, not at all. We have a full-time social worker, Anthony Scott, who is vital to our mission here. He does a lot of exoneree support. It's, kind of the end of the litigation role to some extent, although in Mr. Myers' case in particular, of course, we're working on, compensation for him. So we still have some ongoing litigation for him as well. But Anthony works with clients, both while they are incarcerated and then post-incarceration to help them reintegrate into society, help, with any job placement, with getting, just the basic setup, getting an ID, getting a social security card, getting those basics put in place so that you can move forward.
Driver's licenses, right, as well?
Yep.
All those things. How unusual is it for an Innocence Project to have a full-time social worker?
To my knowledge, and this may be a better question for Seth, but it's fairly. I think it's some have them, some don't. I don't know that it's common, but I don't know that it's quite rare either. So I think it's kind of a mixed bag. I think a number of projects use social workers. Mm-hmm. But I don't have specific numbers.
Okay. Well, it's a wonderful addition to the staff to have someone there once the person is free. The challenges they face are many, and Anthony Scott does a wonderful job. There was one thing that I wanted to ask you as we close out our time together. And that is the issue of compensation. People who are listening to our podcast may not realize even what that word means as it's tied to a wrongful conviction. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. Florida law provides for compensation for individuals who have been wrongfully incarcerated. There are a lot of procedural hurdles to that, but the gist of it is that if they meet certain requirements, which can be very burdensome requirements, they are eligible for $50,000 per every year of wrongful incarceration. But that is capped at $2 million. So for someone like Mr. Myers, who served 42 and a half years, that's already exceeds the cap. So he doesn't actually get the entire compensation to which he would be entitled otherwise. And then there's some other hurdles, not for Mr. Myers. Mr. Myers was eligible under the statute, but the statute has something called a clean hands provision, which if you have a prior violent felony conviction unrelated to your wrongful incarceration or to felony convictions of any kind, you're not eligible for compensation under the statute. So as you're aware, he was convicted with his uncle Clifford, who did have, he was older. As you said, Nathan was only 18. His uncle Clifford was older, and he did have prior felonies. And so even though those felonies are, more than 40 years old, in fact, they were from, the 60s, he is not eligible for compensation, even though, he and Nathan are very similarly situated.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of other states, you talk about what Florida does. Does every state have a compensation law or statute?
No, not every state does. The vast majority of states have some form. Florida is the only state that has this clean hands provision. Most states don't have that kind of restriction, but every state's compensation law is a little bit different, has different, requirements. But most states, I'm not sure if it's all, but most have a compensation statute, to my knowledge.
I think from what I've read, about 30 states do, and about 20 do not.
Sounds right. Right.
I know Texas.
More do than don't.
Right. Texas is out in front with $80,000 per year for compensation. And then there are states that give so very, very little. So there's a huge range of what a person might be given. There's no uniformity. Right. There's very little uniformity. All right, that's great, right. Because I think people don't realize that there is such a thing as compensation, and so often when I talk about the Innocence Project of Florida, people will say, "Oh, that's a tremendous amount of money." If we take, say, Nathan, and I always ask people the question when they say that, which would you prefer, the years or the money? And of course, everybody says, yes, I would prefer the years. Of course. Because you can't get those back. Yeah. So, but I would like to see every state have something in terms of compensation. And maybe, so would I. Maybe we will. Maybe we will in time. Who knows? Well, we are.
I think something else people should take into account with the compensation is that, the cost of incarceration, they're paying for that on an annual basis. So
that's right. That's
just
right.
As an additional point to that.
And I think too, what we don't often talk about is while the innocent person is sitting in prison, the guilty person is out there somewhere. And that's
absolutely right.
That to me is the irony. I don't know what I would call it, but it's a very sad fact in so many cases of wrongful conviction. Well, I really appreciate the time you've given us today, Krista. It certainly you've been able to shine a light on this particular case, and we've already interviewed Shelley Thibodeau, who is the director of the new Conviction Integrity Unit, and the other guest that we plan to interview is Nathan Myers himself. So we are hoping that we will be able to do that very, very soon. Thank you once again for your time today, and I hope you've given our listeners something to think about. This is Pursuing Justice. I'm Harriet Hindell. Thank you for spending some time with us today, listeners, and we hope that you will return to hear the next podcast.